Before him stood the limp body of Ambassador Linda Roy, her head tilted at an unnatural angle, a thin silver noose around her neck. The execution had been swift, silent, and utterly devoid of ceremony. The Galactic Council had executed her in accordance with Law 473b, unintentional offenses against supreme honor. A mere sneeze, an involuntary biological function, had cost her life. The Saranai had expected silence from Earth. After all, what could a minor species from the backwater Sol system do? Their warships were outdated, their planetary defenses laughable, and their standing among the Council was barely above that of primitive cave dwellers. Surely, the humans would submit. They were wrong. On Earth, the broadcast of Ambassador Roy's execution played on every screen across the planet. It interrupted morning coffee, board meetings, traffic jams, and video game streams. It cut through sitcoms, late-night talk shows, and even the holy grail of American television, Super Bowl highlights. There was no warning, no explanation, just the cold, brutal image of a human woman hanging lifeless in an alien courtroom. For the first time in human history, every single person on Earth stopped what they were doing and felt the same thing at the same time: rage. Inside the United Nations of Earth War Room, General Jack Mad Dog Reynolds stubbed out his cigar on a classified document, rose to his feet, and spat onto the floor. His weathered face, etched with years of battle, twisted in disgust. He had fought in wars, had seen men die in the most horrific ways imaginable, but he had never seen something that filled him with such burning fury. "They think we'll lie down," he growled, pacing across the room like a caged animal. His uniform stretched over broad shoulders, his chest adorned with medals he had long stopped caring about. "They think we'll send a strongly worded letter, maybe an official condemnation." His voice dripped with sarcasm. President Alan King, a man who had once campaigned on the slogan "Diplomacy First," sat pale-faced at the head of the table, the weight of the moment pressing upon him. "General," he said carefully, "we need to consider our options." "We have exactly one option, sir." Reynolds turned to the gathered military and political brass. "We go to war." A nervous energy rippled through the room. War with the Galactic Council was unthinkable. The Council controlled entire fleets, spanned thousands of star systems, and had species far more advanced than humanity. A diplomatic solution was the logical path forward. But Earth wasn't in the mood for logic. Secretary of State Miriam Okafor leaned forward, her sharp eyes narrowing. "If we do this, there's no turning back. The Council will respond with full force." Reynolds crossed his arms. "Then we make sure they regret it." A murmur spread across the room. The old rules no longer applied. The Council had just murdered a human, a diplomat no less, someone who represented peace. Earth would not forget. King exhaled sharply. "Fine," he said at last. "Do it." A smirk tugged at Reynolds' lips. "With pleasure." The Galactic Council did not have a word for declaration of war. Such things were considered beneath civilized species. When a transmission from Earth reached the Council chambers, the delegates assumed it was an apology. Instead, it was a message from General Reynolds himself. The image flickered onto the main view screen of the Council chambers, displaying Reynolds in his full military regalia, flanked by two heavily armed soldiers. He leaned forward, staring directly into the camera, his voice carrying the weight of 10 billion furious humans. "This is a message from Earth," he said, his voice steady, measured. "You just killed one of our own. You thought that would be the end of it." He let the silence stretch, the weight of his words settling over the room. "You have no idea what you've just started." The transmission cut. No demands. No negotiations. No threats. Just a promise. Supreme Sovereign Xyler shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His advisors whispered among themselves, their neural implants buzzing with calculations. Surely, this was posturing. Humans had no hope against the might of the Council. Then came the first blow. Within hours, the Council's primary communication network, a vast interstellar web of encrypted transmissions, was infiltrated. The intruder bypassed security measures as if they were non-existent, replacing the usual bureaucratic updates with an endless loop of an ancient Earth recording. "Yippee-ki-yay, motherf." The broadcast cut before finishing, only for it to repeat again, and again, and again. By the time the council managed to shut down the compromised system, the damage had already been done. Every governmental AI had been infected with human malware, their once efficient processing power now dedicated to generating what the humans called memes. Council officials opened their reports only to be met with images of a grinning dog in sunglasses captioned, "Guess who's about to get wrecked?" It was chaos. But that was just the beginning. At the edge of council space, a fleet of Earth's most advanced warships emerged from the void. The council had expected a traditional military campaign, fleets clashing, planets bombarded, strategic defenses overwhelmed. What they got was far worse. Human ships didn't attack with overwhelming force. They struck where it hurt the most: infrastructure. They stole council supply depots, hijacked trade routes, and flooded the black market with authentic galactic artifacts made in China. One particularly audacious attack saw a group of Earth's special forces infiltrate the Grand Council treasury, disguised as interstellar pizza delivery men. By the time security realized what was happening, the entire reserve of council credits had been converted into Earth currency, destabilizing the galactic economy overnight. And then came the worst humiliation of all. In the very heart of the council's homeworld, a massive screen was erected overnight, playing a single video on repeat. A speech from a long-dead Earth leader, a man whose words echoed across centuries. "We will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight." As the speech climaxed, fireworks exploded across the sky, forming the unmistakable shape of Earth's flag. The message was clear. The war had begun. For the first time in its history, the Galactic Council felt something it had never experienced before: fear. The Galactic Council's first mistake was assuming that humans fought like everyone else. The second mistake was believing that war was won through superior firepower. Their third and greatest mistake was underestimating just how much humans enjoyed a good scrap. On the Council's newly established war front, a planet-sized space station known as Zarthun Prime, the assembled alien armada gathered to plan Earth's swift subjugation. This was where wars were meant to be coordinated, strategies devised, and most importantly, the illusion of the Council's invincibility maintained. It was a fortress, a beacon of law and order. Then the humans found its bar. "Gentlemen," Sergeant Rick Bigfoot Malone said, adjusting the collar of his stolen council officer's uniform, "welcome to the Spirited Nebula, the finest watering hole in the galaxy." He kicked open the door with a dramatic flourish, stepping into the crowded, neon-lit cantina. The bar was packed with an assortment of alien species, all in various states of intoxication. Towering reptilians nursed vats of bubbling liquor, multi-limbed insectoids clicked their mandibles over frothing mugs, and gelatinous beings absorbed alcohol directly into their semi-solid bodies. The air was thick with the scent of a dozen different fumes, the glow of intergalactic neon signs, and the muffled sound of music that struggled to match the chaos of the conversations inside. Rick swaggered in like he owned the place, his team following close behind. Lieutenant Mason, a wiry, fast-talking Bostonian, cracked his knuckles. "You sure this is the right place to start an intergalactic incident, Sarge?" Rick grinned. "Absolutely. Nothing says, 'We're here to ruin your day,' quite like a proper bar fight." They hadn't come to Zarthun Prime looking for a fight, exactly. They had come to sabotage the station's command center, disable its defense grid, and leave the Galactic Council's war effort in shambles. But plans had a funny way of shifting when an opportunity presented itself. And right now, the opportunity was a room full of aliens, all of whom thought humans were a joke. Rick sauntered up to the bar, waving down the bartender, a tall, thin alien with translucent skin and too many fingers. "2 of your strongest drinks," he said, "and 1 for the big guy." He jerked his thumb at the massive armored brute sitting at the bar, a Yulnaxian enforcer, one of the Galactic Council's most feared warriors. 8 feet tall, built like a living tank, and covered in biometal plating. The Yulnaxian barely spared Rick a glance. The bartender hesitated. "That might not be." Rick grinned. Relax. What's the worst that could happen? The drinks arrived in tall, steaming mugs, the liquid inside shifting colors at random. Rick took a sip, shuddered as the drink physically growled at him, then turned to the Yolnaxian and gave him a friendly nod. Cheers, buddy. The Yolnaxian finally looked at him. His glowing red eyes narrowed. You address me? Rick's grin widened. Yeah, you look like the kind of guy who can appreciate a good drink. He lifted his mug in a toast. The alien scowled. You are human. Guilty as charged. You should not be here. Rick clinked his glass against the Yolnaxian's. And yet here I am. There was a long silence, a tension thick enough to cut with a plasma blade. Then, without warning, the Yolnaxian downed his drink in one go. Rick followed suit. The alien slammed his mug onto the counter. Another. Rick wiped his mouth, feeling the alcohol burn its way through his bloodstream like a nuclear explosion. His vision blurred slightly. He chuckled. You're on. The crowd around them began to stir, whispers rippling through the bar. A human challenging a Yolnaxian to a drinking contest? That wasn't just bold. It was suicidal. The drinks kept coming, one after another, faster and stronger. The alien patrons gathered, placing bets, laughing at the absurdity of it all. The Yolnaxian, for all his size and strength, began to sway. Rick, despite the fire in his stomach, remained upright. Then the Yolnaxian growled, grabbed Rick by the collar, and threw him across the room. Rick crashed into a table, sending drinks flying. Silence fell. Then, like a switch had been flipped, the bar exploded into chaos. Mason decked a three-eyed amphibian before it could react. A burly reptilian lunged at one of the Marines, only to get a chair shattered over its back. A tentacled alien tried to grapple one of Rick's men, but the Marine responded by grabbing the nearest bottle of alcohol and smashing it over the creature's slimy head. The fight spread like wildfire. The air filled with roars, shouts, and the unmistakable sound of glass breaking. A gelatinous alien attempted to engulf Mason, who responded by pouring an entire bottle of liquor into its mass. The creature shuddered, hiccuped, and then collapsed into a pile of quivering goo. Rick pulled himself to his feet just in time to dodge a barstool hurled in his direction. He turned, saw the Yolnaxian charging at him, and did the only thing a man in his position could do. He grabbed a nearby jukebox and slammed it into the alien's face. The machine crackled, music blaring to life. Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down. The Yolnaxian staggered back, momentarily stunned. Rick grinned, grabbed a bottle from the counter, and shattered it over the alien's head. The Yolnaxian dropped like a stone. The bar fight escalated. Marines and aliens tangled in a brutal, chaotic brawl that defied any sense of order. A reptilian soldier tackled one of Rick's men, only for another Marine to swing down from a ceiling light and knock the attacker unconscious with a perfectly executed flying kick. A bartender ducked behind the counter, muttering to himself. I should have retired last cycle. Glass shattered. Drinks spilled. The room became a battlefield of fists, claws, and flying furniture. Then the sirens blared. Council security forces stormed into the bar, their polished armor gleaming under the neon lights. Cease this, one of them started before being immediately hit in the face with a thrown beer mug. Rick wiped blood from his lip, eyes glinting with mischief. Time to go, boys. The Marines broke off, weaving through the chaos as council officers struggled to restore order. Rick grabbed a passing alien, shoved a half-empty drink into its hand, and shouted, "Hold this," before diving out the back exit. The team sprinted through the narrow alleyways of the station, alarms blaring in their wake. Mason, still breathless from the fight, grinned. That went well. Rick adjusted his collar, glancing back at the flashing lights behind them. Could have gone worse. Another Marine chuckled. We just started a multi-species riot in the heart of the enemy's war station. Rick shrugged. Like I said, could have gone worse. They reached their escape point, a stolen council transport waiting in the docking bay. As they boarded, Mason glanced at Rick. You realize this means the council's going to take us seriously now. Rick smirked. Good. Let M. The transport lifted off, vanishing into the void. The Galactic Council, once confident in their supremacy, now had a new problem. Humans didn't just fight wars. They enjoyed them. Supreme Sovereign Xyler's tendrils twitched as he surveyed the gathered officials. Even the most composed among them looked rattled. Reports had flooded in from every corner of Council space. Supply lines disrupted, warships disappearing, planetary governors resigning in sheer frustration. Worse yet, the humans had somehow managed to convert an entire Council military base into a theme park. It was unclear how, but it was undeniable that something called Laser Tag Arena Alpha had replaced a once mighty fortress. "This is unacceptable," Xyler hissed, slamming a clawed fist against the armrest of his hovering throne. His voice reverberated through the chamber, but it did little to restore order. The Minister of Defense, a six-eyed serpentine, being known as Vakenar, coiled and uncoiled in agitation. "They do not fight like any species we have encountered. They refuse to engage in proper warfare. Our strategies are meaningless to them." Across the table, Grand Admiral Korgath, a creature whose bioluminescent exoskeleton pulsed with frustration, let out a long, clicking sigh. "We thought their lack of discipline was a weakness. Instead, it is an abyss into which all reason falls." A nervous aide stepped forward, adjusting the translation device around his elongated neck. We have intercepted their communications, Excellency." Xyler gestured impatiently. "Well, what have you learned?" The aide swallowed. "They have no strategy." Silence. Then murmurs of disbelief rippled through the chamber. "No strategy?" Vakenar snapped. "Impossible. Every civilization follows patterns, supply lines, military command structures, coordinated assaults." The aide hesitated. "Humans improvise." The murmurs grew louder, this time tinged with something dangerously close to fear. "They make things up as they go," the aide continued, voice trembling. "And it works." Xyler exhaled slowly. He had never considered that war could be waged in such a manner. Every species followed rules, understood the cost of war, sought victory through superior tactics. The humans, however, seemed to be treating this conflict like some grand joke, one they were determined to tell until the entire galaxy was laughing along with them. He straightened. "Then we must stop playing their game." The murmurs ceased. All eyes were on him. "If they refuse to engage us properly, then we shall escalate beyond their comprehension. We will invoke the last resort." Vakenar stiffened. "Excellency, you don't mean—" Xyler's tendrils curled in satisfaction. "The Ancient Guardians." A collective shudder passed through the chamber. The Ancient Guardians were not a myth, not a legend, but a force so powerful, so incomprehensible, that even the Council feared their awakening. They were remnants of an age before recorded history, beings who had shaped the cosmos itself before retreating into slumber. No one dared disturb them. Until now, on a desolate world at the edge of known space, deep beneath the ruins of a forgotten civilization, a signal pulsed into the void. For eons, the Ancient Guardians had rested undisturbed, their vast minds slumbering in dimensions beyond mortal understanding. They had watched species rise and fall, empires flourish and crumble, always indifferent. Until now, a ripple spread across the stars, a presence stirring in the void. One by one, the Guardians awoke. At first, they were curious. Their vast, cosmic awareness absorbed the state of the galaxy, processing centuries of information in an instant. Then they found the humans, and they recoiled in horror. It was not their technology that alarmed them, nor was it their aggression. No, it was something far more disturbing. Humans were insane. They waged war while laughing, mocked death itself, and engaged in acts of violence that served no discernible purpose. Other species sought order, stability, conquest. Humans sought entertainment. The Guardians delved deeper, scanning Earth's history, searching for patterns. They found Florida Man. They found nuclear weapons used twice just to prove a point. They found the invention of reality television. The most powerful minds in existence faltered. The first Guardian, a being of infinite wisdom, whispered to the others, "They are uncontainable." The second, whose mere thoughts could birth and destroy stars, murmured, "They cannot be reasoned with." The third, the oldest among them, simply stated, "Run." And so, the most powerful beings in the galaxy did what no one had ever seen them do. They fled. The signal that had reawakened them was severed. Their physical forms dissolved into the fabric of space itself. Across the galaxy, remnants of their existence vanished. Entire worlds wiped clean of their influence. By the time the Council realized what had happened, the Guardians were gone, and the war continued. Xyler had not expected this outcome. The decision to awaken the ancient Guardians had been made with absolute certainty. There had been no contingency plan, no expectation that the plan might fail. And yet, here they were. A trembling aide approached. "Excellency, what do we do now?" Xyler did not answer immediately. His mind raced, seeking a path forward. The humans had disrupted their military operations, humiliated their forces, and now driven the most powerful beings in the universe into hiding. What options remained? A new voice cut through the silence. Surrender. Every official turned. Standing at the entrance to the chamber was Grand Chancellor Ulfera, an elder statesman who had guided the council for centuries. His 3 eyes gleamed with something unreadable. Xyler clenched his jaw. "You suggest surrender?" Ulfera nodded. "We have exhausted our options. We cannot defeat them through force, cannot outmaneuver them through strategy. Even the Guardians feared them." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Xyler's tendrils twitched. "You suggest we submit?" Ulfera shook his head. "No. I suggest something far more dangerous." A pause. "Then we invite them to govern." Silence fell. It was absurd. It was unthinkable. And yet what other choice did they have? The transmission was received on Earth less than an hour later. President Alan King leaned back in his chair, rereading the message on the screen. He rubbed his temples. They want us to take over?" Across the room, General Reynolds chuckled. "Hell, we already run half their trade routes, crashed their stock market, and turned one of their military outposts into an amusement park. Might as well make it official." King shot him a look. "This is unprecedented." Miriam Okafor, the Secretary of State, folded her arms. "So is everything else that's happened since they killed Ambassador Roy." There was a long pause. Reynolds leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "You know what this means, don't you?" King exhaled. "We're about to run a goddamn galactic empire." A slow grin spread across Reynolds' face. "Dibs on naming the planets." King pinched the bridge of his nose. "This is a disaster." Okafor smirked. "This is human history." Outside the window, the stars stretched infinitely into the void. And Earth, a backwater planet from the far edge of the galaxy, had just taken its first step into ruling it all. The Galactic Council's surrender should have been the end of the war. By every known measure of diplomacy and interstellar governance, this was the moment where negotiations would begin, treaties would be signed, and stability restored. That was how things worked. Civilized species resolved conflicts through law, bureaucracy, and carefully worded agreements that ensured everyone walked away with something. But humans had never been civilized in the way the galaxy understood it. The war didn't end. It just changed form. It started with the flags. Almost overnight, Earth's banner was plastered across council buildings, spaceports, and entire planets. Some worlds embraced their new human overlords, eager to avoid further conflict. Others resisted, assuming that Earth would respond with brutality, with occupation, with the crushing hand of imperialism. Instead, they got capitalism, a minor trade hub known as Drosvana, for woke up one morning to find every major store replaced with neon-lit franchises from Earth. The Council's old supply lines had collapsed, so humanity filled the void with their own economic systems. In less than a week, the planet's entire economy had been upended. There were now Starbucks on moons that had never seen sunlight. McDonald's franchises on stations once considered sacred relics. A particularly unfortunate banking planet had its entire currency replaced by something called Dogecoin. For those who had expected war, this was something far worse. General Jack Reynolds sat at the head of a vast war table, watching as reports flooded in. He had fought countless battles in his time, but nothing had prepared him for this. The humans weren't just winning. They were annexing the galaxy by sheer force of cultural dominance. Lieutenant Mason, still battered from the previous weeks of chaos, dropped into the seat beside him. "Sir, we have a problem." Reynolds grunted. "We got plenty of those." "Be specific." Mason threw a datapad onto the table. 3 more planets just declared war on us." Reynolds groaned. "Let me guess. One of them tried to charge a mandatory convenience fee on human imports?" Mason nodded grimly. "We retaliated with a 500% tariff." Reynolds shook his head. "Goddamn economic warfare. Back in my day, we just shot people." Mason smirked. "Well, if it makes you feel better, our special ops just took over an entire orbital shipyard by winning a drinking contest." Reynolds snorted. "Which one of the boys pulled that off?" Mason hesitated. "Not one of ours. It was an accountant." Reynolds blinked. "Excuse me." Mason handed him another report. Apparently, some financial analyst got into a bet with a council admiral over whether he could drink 3 consecutive glasses of Thurzik's firewine without passing out. When the admiral lost, he had to sign over full control of the shipyard. Reynolds leaned back, rubbing his temples. "Jesus Christ. We're conquering the galaxy through bar bets." Mason grinned. "And tax fraud." Reynolds exhaled, eyes scanning the growing list of war fronts that weren't technically wars. Earth's forces weren't fighting in traditional battles anymore. They were outmaneuvering the Galactic Council in ways no alien species had ever imagined. The military wasn't seizing planets, they were setting up theme parks. Special forces weren't assassinating leaders. They were ruining the galactic housing market by buying up real estate with Earth's absurdly volatile currency. And through it all, the Council had no idea how to fight back. Across the war room, President Alan King paced restlessly, his carefully maintained diplomatic demeanor fraying at the edges. "We can't run an empire, Jack," he muttered, half to himself. "We weren't meant to run an empire." Reynolds exhaled through his nose. "Could have fooled me. Looks like we're doing a hell of a job." King shot him a sharp look. "No, we're not. We're improvising. Every single day, our people are making up new rules, new policies, new methods of war that shouldn't even exist. We have Marines who just annexed an entire asteroid belt by winning a poker game. We have franchises running planets now, Jack. Actual corporate takeovers instead of military ones." Reynolds shrugged. "Look, I get it. It's messy. But the Council started this fight. They didn't think we'd push back." King clenched his fists. "And what happens when we push too far? What happens when we become them?" The room fell into silence. For all their absurd victories, for all their unconventional tactics, the truth loomed over them. Earth wasn't just fighting a war anymore. It was ruling the galaxy in ways that could never be undone. They had turned the Council's own systems against them, twisted galactic law into something unrecognizable, and reshaped the very fabric of interstellar governance. And it wasn't slowing down. A sharp chime interrupted the tension. Miriam Okafor, calm as ever, adjusted her glasses as she read the incoming transmission. "You might want to see this." The view screen flickered to life. An alien figure stood at attention, his robes marked with the insignia of the few remaining neutral worlds. His expression was carefully neutral, but the twitch in his tendrils betrayed his anxiety. "I speak on behalf of the remaining free systems," he said. "We request, no demand, that Earth cease its expansion immediately." King leaned forward. "And if we don't?" The alien hesitated. Then, reluctantly, he spoke. "We will surrender." The humans in the room stared. Mason coughed. I don't think they know what demand means." King's brows furrowed. "You're saying you want us to take over?" The alien's composure cracked. "You have already taken over. The Council is in ruins. Our economies now run on Earth systems. Our people, our children, are listening to your music. The very structure of our societies has been rewritten by your influence." Reynolds smirked. "So what's the problem?" The alien's eyes burned. "We do not know how to fight you." There was a long silence. Then King leaned back, rubbing his temples. Jesus Christ. The alien's expression remained grim. You do not see it yet. But you will. Your species does not conquer. It consumes. And soon there will be nothing left but Earth. The transmission ended. No one spoke. Reynolds exhaled. So what's the plan, boss? King stared at the blank screen, mind racing. The war was over. The galaxy belonged to them. And somehow that was the worst possible outcome. He stood, straightened his tie, and turned to the room. We find a way out of this. Reynolds snorted. A little late for that, don't you think? King's gaze hardened. Then we find a way to fix it. Okafor folded her arms. How do you fix an empire this big? King exhaled. We figure it out. Or we drown in our own success. Reynolds cracked his knuckles. Well, guess we better start swimming. Beyond the window, the stars stretched out infinitely. A vast empire, now, under human control. And whether they wanted to or not, Earth was never going to stop expanding. Not now. Not ever.